Okay. That little person always comes on to let us know we're recording. Thank you, Christine. First item is the adoption of the agenda. If there are no changes, we'll deem that adopted. Next item is the approval of the minutes of February 16th, 2022. I have one small edit. On page 2, I believe the last name of Mr. Tolman does not have an E. So we can just correct that, take out the E of Mr. Tolman's name. Are there any other corrections or edits to the thing, Kathy?
George, I was wondering if we're going to have some more discussion of some of these recommendations. I'm sorry, also, I wasn't able to be here last time. I had some unexpected issues crop up. And I was particularly interested in having a little more discussion on some of the ones that we had been discussing earlier.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's the nature of the report. So
Okay.
we're going to be discussing that in the report. Sure.
Okay.
We understand you're having missed the meeting. You've been quite regular, so we understand. Larry had just talked earlier about his missing it also. Thank you. Any other edits to the minutes? If not, we'll deem them accepted. Now we get to the welcome of our newest commissioner, Anita, who last meeting had some difficulty connecting on. Unfortunately, that's the nature of technology, but she's here today. I'd like, I don't know who's scraping around near the microphone, but try to be a little quieter if you could. If each of the commissioners could just introduce themselves briefly to Anita, and then I'm going to ask Anita if she can introduce herself to the commissioners and give a little background to them. Let's start with Ron in the upper, my screen, at least the upper left-hand box. Ron?
Good morning and welcome, Ron Stubblefield, Vice Chair, and just happy to see you and thanks to join.
Larry? Larry?
I had to find the unmute button. I'm Larry Lauer. I'm I live in Allen, Maryland, lifelong resident, and second term on this committee, council, whatever. They have lots of different names for it. And glad to be here.
We've been joined by Perry. Where'd Perry go? You were on the screen a second ago, Perry. You there? There you go. No, where's Perry? Well, anyway, we'll get back to Perry. Kathy?
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Kathy Googlis. I live in Gaithersburg, Maryland. I'm retired federal executive, and pleased to meet you.
We've been joined by Susan. Welcome, Susan. David?
Good morning, Anita. David Hill, 30-year plus resident of the county, lawyer and consultant by profession, and I live in Silver Spring. Welcome.
Thank you.
Galena?
Good morning. Good morning, Anita. Welcome to our team, our very good team. I'm a resident in the Montgomery County since 1992. I full-time work, and I also new member of commission, just few months. Welcome. Yeah.
Susan?
Welcome, Anita. I'm a Montgomery County resident since 1987, an attorney, but working with the federal government in a different capacity. I don't know what else to say, but glad to have you on board. I've enjoyed the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Perry, welcome. Perry? You want
Morning, good morning, everyone. My name is Perry Paler, raised here in Silver Spring, Maryland, currently reside in Silver Spring, about a mile away from where I grew up. Graduated from Paint Branch High School. I'm a licensed attorney here in Maryland, and I serve as Deputy State's Attorney for Prince George's County. Along with this commission, I also serve on the Montgomery College Pinckney Innovation Center Foundation. It's a great foundation. We recruit businesses, STEM businesses, to actually build their headquarters or build office space on the college campus in order to recruit jobs for our students. And it's a great foundation. I really enjoy the work. So welcome this morning.
Nicole?
Good morning, Anita. Welcome to the commission. I am a resident of Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm a research scientist, and I also serve as a faculty member at American University, as well as Montgomery College.
Chris?
Hey, Anita, I'm Chris Danley. I live in Chevy Chase. I am an attorney in private practice, and we're really happy to have you on board. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let me not leave out staff. You've met Christine and had conversation with her. So let me ask Ed Latner to introduce himself.
Sorry, my name's Ed Latner with the County Attorney's Office. I'm staff to the commission.
That's the briefest Ed has ever been. And how about Stephen Matheny?
Hey, Anita, welcome. I work at the county office building, the council office building, and help Christine staff this.
All right, Anita, this is your opportunity to introduce yourself and share your background.
Okay, thank you. I'm Anita, as you'll know, Mpambara Cox. My middle name will correct and put that in there. But I'm delighted to be on the commission. I've been a resident of Montgomery County for close to 17 years here in the Durwood area. And I'm particularly excited to be able to work with all of you as a team to try and, contribute to the community that we live in. My background is economics and international relations. We are a State Department family, so moving around is what we've done a lot of. So we always came back, but never for more than 3 months, or even sometimes not even a month. In the 28 years that my husband and I have been married, so we've lived all over. Finally, kind of it's boiling down and settling down here. Other than that, I don't have like a job, a career trajectory like most people do, but I've done a lot of different things. Amongst them, I've been a media analyst, but for the European Union. I've done some work with Homeland Security. I've done some work writing. I run my own small nonprofit that connects communities between here and where I come from. It's more child focused. Yesterday we were doing some International Women's Day events. Do a lot of volunteering in my children's schools in the community. Right now I serve on the Multicultural Affairs Committee, the Gaithersburg Multicultural Affairs Committee, where we try and, bring all these different cultures, I guess, together in one place. I think that's probably all. I live here with my husband and 2 children.
Thank you, Anita, and welcome to the commission.
Thank you.
George,
Yes.
sorry, I'm very sorry to interrupt, and welcome so much, Anita. Just wanted to introduce Marie Jean-Paul as well, also a council staff member.
I didn't know that Marie was with us today. I apologize.
She's also on the
Yeah,
line if you want to introduce yourself.
Oh, by
Marie.
all means, Marie, I didn't know you were with us right now. I never would have overlooked you, Marie. I so apologize. Thanks, Christine. Marie?
Good morning.
You hear me?
Yes. Would you introduce yourself otherwise? Thank you, Christine. I sincerely
She's
apologize.
on mute, George,
Yeah, she's on mute now.
so she may not
Hi.
realize it. She may be talking.
Yeah. Anyway, Marie Jean Paul is another staff member from the county council who has assisted us tremendously over the last several years. Thank you, Christine, for my oversight. I apologize. All right. So now we get to where the rubber hits the road at this point. You all have the draft report, and the floor is really now open for comments and suggested edits. At the next meeting, we're going to hopefully approve a final report. So we need now to work on any edits and changes to what you have before you so we can finalize it. So the floor is open.
Hey, George, this is Chris. Before we get started, could you just tell us the schedule for the rest of our term? I understand we're going to be meeting next month to have further
Next month,
discussions.
next month we'll meet to hopefully approve the final report, which goes to the council, as you know, per the charter by May 1st. After that, I don't really know. Christine, you might be able to help us, although this is your first go round also, I know, with a full term of a commission, but our terms end in December formally. So once this gets to the council, which has to decide what they do with our recommendations, whether to accept them, modify them, reject them by August, or end of July, beginning of August, to put anything on the ballot for November. We obviously, we have in the past obviously not met over the summer, and while we can pick up again in the fall, in the past, and Larry, you're our historian since you were on for a term before this, 4 years earlier. My understanding is that they have not basically met in the carryover in the fall as they awaited the new appointments. And started work because the terms were going to come to an end come that December. So I'm not sure that, per your request, Chris, that we would be convening again in the fall, but I could be wrong. I mean, we could, but I don't know there's any reason. Larry.
Yeah, you're correct, George. I mean, the last council commission rather didn't meet after we submitted the report for May. But I mean, I would think that if there's issues, this would be a time that if there's issues that should be studied, rather than lose that time for the next commission, it might be good to, if we can identify issues that need to have continual study. We won't be able to make any recommendations, but we might be able to help out the next council, the next committee rather, by having done some study on the issues that might be relevant, if we have any. I mean, I felt that that was kind of a dead space time that we could have used to better advantage. But I don't know that it would require monthly meetings. We may want to meet once every 3 months or something like that. Whatever. Anyway,
we could use that time to study issues and turn it over to the next commission, if that's the will of the group. We could see and decide that in May, perhaps, if we met in May and decide that. Okay, let's go into the report. So the floor is open for edits, comments, suggestions. Who wants to jump in first? Kathy. Want to identify a page or
Yes.
however you want to approach.
It's page 23.
Page 23. All right, let us all have a moment to turn to it. 23. Okay. Go ahead.
So section 206, removal of the county executive. I know we had,
That's the removal.
yes, removal of the county executive.
All right. Go ahead.
I know we've had a lot of discussion on this. And I guess, I have had concerns because I think there's a lot of discussion in the public realm about having a way to remove a public official. And as it was noted in the report, a recall is not within the purview of the Charter Review Commission, which a recall being the public removing an elected official. However, I've had concern about other public officials removing a public official all along. And I've always been concerned about the term misconduct and what that might constitute. It's very open-ended, and as has been noted other times by several people, it could be weaponized and cause political strife. So I have real concerns about that issue, as well as the county council members issue.
Oh, Nicole, we get to see your picture there finally. Nice to see your face.
Nice.
Okay. Anyone want to address that? Kathy's comment?
I guess I've got two questions, Kathy. One, what are you proposing we do relative to the report, given the concerns you just stated? And two, can you elaborate on what you're referring to when you say the county council issue?
Well, right below that, David, on page 23, the removal of council members. Again, it's mirrors the recommendation, or at least the discussion that we've had about the county executive removal for serious misconduct in office or willful neglect of duty. Willful neglect of duty must be demonstrated occurred for 180 executive days, but it would be removal by a vote of the council. So for both of those issues, I have some concern. And I guess I would say we studied it, and depending on how everybody else feels, and we say whether or not we recommend it. But at this point, I wouldn't recommend it.
Good night.
Susan?
I too have the same concerns. It continues, although, we had our discussions, but it just does not sit well with me. So I too would go for not including it as a change. I also, should I mention another one I have concerns about, or are we just
No,
staying?
let's stick in this issue at this
Okay.
point.
Okay.
Can I just add to that and say, not having been obviously part of the deliberations before, and I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, was there any attempt to clarify what sorts of serious misconduct you could be, I don't know, sort of thinking about or alluding to? Is there a way we can define it, maybe put some examples of what that misconduct would be, or somebody provide an example perhaps of what it is? Because I guess in my mind, I'm looking at 180 days of the same sort of misconduct happening, and nobody's, I mean, for 6 months, we sort of sit there and let misconduct fester, I think is what I'm kind of in my mind. And then I'm thinking, so the court then, he can appeal or she can appeal. And then what happens with that appeal? Are you still serving as county executive, even though, you're in the process of being removed? And how long would this sort of process go for if that sort of limbo existed? And why, I think somebody mentioned in previous minutes I saw, why would we sit around for 180 days of this misconduct happening while someone is in office?
Galena?
George and commissioners, I also asked you, George, before, it's a little bit not clear to me. Don't we have, I think removal, it's so drastic action. It's so, don't we have some disciplinary action? Because if a member of, if a council member or if official person, if misconduct, a very serious misconduct, don't we have it any mistake? We normally, I thought, we normally have some disciplinary action, not so drastic, right? Removal immediately. It's my opinion was before, and I asked you earlier, it's not clear to me why, whether or not could be some disciplinary action, not as drastic as removal. Do we have that, or could we have that?
Can I just chime in there? To her question, it just says has committed serious misconduct. It's qualified by the word serious. If it was just misconduct, then maybe discipline, but if it's serious misconduct, is there any doubt that they should be removed? But my question, is what sorts of misconduct are we talking about that is of the serious nature that warrants removal like almost immediately?
I think that's part of my concern is the definition. There is no real definition, whereas I believe state law, and Ed can probably enlighten us a little bit more about that, would allow if there was conviction of a crime, for example, which is more definitive because there are laws, and if somebody violates the law and it's a serious degree of, whether it's a felony or misdemeanor or whatever. I mean, there's definitions around all of those things. What troubles me about this one is there's not really a definition of misconduct, and it's kind of in the eyes of the beholder what, we probably all have our own definitions of what that would be.
George.
Go ahead, David. Chris.
In response to Anita's question and in partial response to Kathy, Anita, one example that was talked about when we talked about this provision was what happened with the Baltimore City Mayor, Catherine Pugh, and her contractual situation to require those with business before the state to purchase her book, and related situations. That's one I can recall. And in that circumstance, or something along those lines, by the time we have a trial and a conviction, that the county executive could be, and if we stuck to the state law and the felony, by the time that process played out, a county executive in office could be in office with serious misconduct well beyond 180 days.
Right.
So, I do think there is sticking to the state law and felony definition would permit a county executive, he or she, to stay in office. And I don't think that's an answer to the issue that's trying to be addressed here.
But without somebody having due process, I have a problem with, if we don't have a certain, I guess, examples, as Anita suggested, and I think we had difficulty with this when we were discussing it, of what would be considered serious misconduct. We're being the judge and the jury of somebody who's being accused of something, that we don't know really they've committed whatever serious misconduct, unless it's something, well, say they were stealing from the government till or something. They still have a due process to prove that, in fact, they weren't. So how can we go ahead and remove them if they're accused of serious misconduct without being assured that, in fact, it's occurred?
So it's not we, it's
David.
it's not we, Susan. I don't know who the we is you're speaking of. It's removal by 9 out of 11 council members. It's not we, this
Okay.
committee, or we, so it's 9 of 11 council members that would be in that process. And as far, and so that's 1 and 2. Going back to the weaponizing concern, I would love to hear how such a thing could be weaponized with 9, a supermajority of council members, 9 of 11 going after. I don't see, given the threshold that we have properly established with the proposal, the concern about how 9 of 11
I speak. Go ahead.
would
David.
weaponize, but that's just me. So I'll stop there.
George, could I just,
In
chime in
addition,
for a
Can I speak? Can I speak? I've been holding my tongue. There seems to be a selective lack of memory as to our debate months and months and months ago. I respect the points that have been raised by Susan and Kathy for sure. But those points were raised months and months and months ago. And as a result, we significantly changed our proposal. We addressed your concerns. We added 180 consecutive days because people were concerned that it might be on a whim that someone might go after a county executive or a council member. So we lengthened the time to show that it had to be 180 consecutive days. We added serious in there purposely to indicate the bar, that it had to be willful. We added that at the request of several of you to make sure. As David just pointed out, we raised the level of the vote to be a supermajority rather than the current 6 of 9. We made it 9 of 11. Again, at the request of several of you to increase the level of due process. Now, as far as the examples, many of you had raised that issue before, and we talked about the fact that when you're drafting legislation, it is impossible to be completely inclusive because there's always going to be left out. And so as I drafted the report in response to one of the comments, and I hate to read to you because I don't want to insult any of you, but I'm going to. By the way, we left out one of the causes that Baltimore, in responding to Mayor Pugh's situation, when they amended their charter to do exactly what we did, they added incompetency as one of the causes to remove their mayor. And we thought it was too vague and should be left to the electorate. So you, the commissioners, felt incompetency should not be included. And so we didn't put that in this proposal. So we made some conscious decisions months ago that you're now wanting to knock out at the 11th hour, which is, you're right, but it seems like a real last minute decision. Now back to the examples. Here's what I put on page 18. To go further and cite specific examples in the charter is neither practical nor desirable, whether it be for excessive absenteeism, for failing to perform all of some of one's duties, for ceasing to show up for public events, for sleeping on the job, or for some other cause. A listing of examples can never be inclusive. Similarly, it would not be appropriate to try to cite to any or all examples of, quote, serious misconduct, quote, that an official might engage in. The burden of proof will be on those bringing the charge. I don't know how I can state it better than I wrote it. The fact is, you can't put all the examples you want in. You don't write legislation that way. Even on the section of the Constitution that deals with criminal charges, they don't put all the crimes in there. You just can't. Ron, you wanted to say something, and then Nicole.
Yeah, in addition to the 9 of 11, so that you just can't weaponize one or two people coming after a county exec, you'll also note there is an appeal process to a court of law that also is a safeguard in case there's any abuse of this approach as well. In addition to the 9 of 11 that David mentioned and the things that you put in as well. Those were put in because we did not want someone to just come with a whim.
So who do they appeal?
No,
to?
wait, Susan, Nicole, I was calling on
Oh,
next.
sorry.
Nicole?
No problem. So I want to go back to something that was said about, and let me acknowledge that there were revisions that were made in an attempt to get us at consensus with comfort about moving this forward. But something was said about increasing the threshold for due process and a super majority. And if we look historically, groupthink is something that can happen with respect to political dynamics and very serious issues that has happened in our nation at more than one time. I don't know that I feel comfortable with the members of the council being the jury for this. It's just, you know, there are dynamics that exist with respect to power and different issues that are going on. And so I don't feel like, I just don't feel comfortable with it. And it's the lack of specificity. And again, I think, George, you made some compelling arguments for why the specificity isn't there, but without it, there's just such an opportunity for wrong things to happen. And I think that it makes sense that we don't want to happen in our county what happened in Baltimore, but we really haven't arrived at a solution that would ensure that we don't have something more egregious that could happen, or similarly at a minimum. So it's not that I'm not recognizing the revisions that have been made, or that I don't recall the earlier conversations. I just feel like we're being railroaded to include something that really I don't feel comfortable with. And so, but I do want to acknowledge that the revisions were made, but I want to communicate that I share Kathy and Susan's concerns, and I don't feel that we've adequately addressed them.
Thank you. Susan?
So who would they appeal to? Would it again be the council members if they're accused of, you know, this egregious conduct? Who would be the reviewer of this?
Circuit Court. It says that, the Circuit Court.
Does it?
Mhm. Can I make a comment, George, please?
Of course, please, Anita.
I have to say that I like that there is a process of appeal to a different, you know, you don't go back to the county council, you go to the court. So when I think there it does allow for due process, because I don't think that somebody who was elected would simply be removed by the county council and not go to the court to receive this due process. So I imagine that things would be ironed out there. And I feel like that particular section is satisfactory to say, we're removing you, but here I am going to court perhaps to prove one way or the other whether you were right in your removal. That, I think, was a strong addition to this. I think where I still find it a little bit different, I mean, difficult to accept, let me say, is, you know, the whole threshold of how do we take somebody out of office that's been elected by the people without going back to the people to say this person should be removed. At that point, if we're not going back to the people who were the ones who got you into office, and it's just 9 council members who are more or less a quorum that votes together, you know, a lot of the time on things, that I think is where you sort of see the problem. There's no balance there. And so, you know,
I'm not sure what you mean by balance.
what I mean by balance is I think that you find that our county council votes a lot of the time together on things. And that perhaps is the groupthink that Nicole was alluding to. I can see that if there was, you know, if they didn't vote together most of the time, perhaps there'd be a way that this would be a more stronger footing to be on for removal from office, for something as serious as removal from office.
Kathy?
I'm also
George,
concerned.
you had hands up,
concerned-
George, but
What day?
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. I didn't see who had his hands up first.
Ron and I have had hands up before you're acknowledging, Kathy.
I apologize. Go ahead, David, Ron.
My comment is in direct response to what Anita just said, which is the group think that was alluded to and the 9 of 11 that you referred to, we don't know that. The current council is made up of 9 people. We're about to go to 11. We're about to go to redistricting. I don't think, you know, I do think there's some concern, there may be some concern that there would be the same kind of majoritarian or unanimous thinking. It remains to be seen. I don't think we can assume that given the changes that have been made per the last election and the efforts to elect 11 council members versus 9. So I kind of resist the thought process. And yes, they have voted together on a lot of issues, but I don't think that when it comes to thinking they're going to group think their way to removing somebody, they're accountable to the voters as well. The council members are accountable to voters as well. So I don't think we should ignore that fact. It's not like the people don't elect the council members as well as the county executive.
Point taken, David. Thank you.
Ron.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in connection with taking a person out of office who's been voted in. If you go back to the previous section of this charter, there's already a provision in there for mental or physical disability that would remove them from office, even though they've been voted in. So that's already in the charter.
All right, Kathy.
In regard to some of what's been said in terms of, you know, due process and whether there would be an investigation, you know, there's nothing specified in terms of what that due process would be up until the point where council members would vote. And as others have mentioned, you know, often it's the group think it's voting as a block. And if there was somebody from a different party, for example, and, you know, if you look at the composition of our current council, it's all one party. Even the county executive at this point is one party. So, you know, you can envision, even though we've had redistricting, we may get different people in of different parties. If, you know, if it could possibly, and we've seen, you know, examples, I'm not going to go into them, but we've seen plenty of examples recently in politics where people raise issues that turn out not to be the same issues. I'm concerned about the disruption of government while all of this is going on, and the appeal process. It can totally derail a new administration that might be coming in if someone did decide they wanted to weaponize it. So I think the current processes that have been outlined are sufficient to address these issues. And in the process of all of this occurring, you know, the next election is the time, if we can't do a recall, the next election is the time to vote it out, the individual out.
Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet? Larry?
You know, the charter provides a distribution of power between the branches, but it is basically most of the power resides with the county council. And the council can do things like if the executive submits a budget that they don't agree with, they can change the budget. It's not like the state where it's a heavily executive power center. And so, I mean, I think that there is enough ambiguity in this that it's not probable. I don't think it's probably, after thinking about listening to this discussion, I think probably it would be something that we don't need to pass, because the council already has a lot of power and can fill in if someone's being incompetent and things like this, and can, you know, there's also the large cadre of professional staff that run the county more than the politicians do. And so anyway, after listening to this, I kind of agree that maybe this is not something we want to recommend.
Galena?
Hey, George, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Chris, go ahead.
Can I go after Galena?
Oh, no, you haven't
Thank you,
spoken
George.
yet, Chris. Go ahead.
Thank you, George. I just want to echo what Nicole said. This draft language has evolved over time. I'm still not comfortable with it. That's not a surprise. But the commission has also evolved over the past 2 years. I think this is the first meeting where we've had all 11 current commissioners, and I think it's healthy to have both Anita and Galena to hear what we've said in the past, even though I know they've done their due diligence and have researched this issue. So I guess where I'm at now is we have all 11 commissioners present. And if this is the draft language that's being proposed to the group, I think we should just go ahead and vote on it.
Galena?
George, may I ask David, Mr. David, to answer my question, because as maybe like less experience, again, assumption is that somebody who is in charge but violates misconduct time after time, and we just witnesses, and it's going on, nothing, no tool of discipline, nothing. We do nothing, and then after 180 days, then it should be removed. That David, please explain me how come we witness misconduct, we witness violation, and do nothing. We don't have anything else like to warn or to talk. How was in Baltimore? A violator did her violation and everybody was okay with that?
George, may I?
Yeah, go ahead, David. She mentioned.
So Galena, I'm not 100% on what happened in Baltimore in terms of how people reacted. I do know that there was a situation where the mayor was engaged in misconduct that was pretty apparent to a lot of people, and it took a lot of time to ultimately remove her, and while she was in office the entire time, and continued with the scheme that was going on while she was being investigated, was aware she was being investigated, and ultimately she resigned short of an election. It wasn't an election that removed her. She resigned when it became apparent that she had violated the law. So so in this circumstance, without more, the same circumstance could take place here, and that's my concern about why I think we should have the language. But I don't disagree with Chris. We have all 11 commissioners for the first time in a long time. And, I'm certainly in favor of the language, but I think we should go to a vote. Does that respond, Galena, did I respond to your question? I'm sorry.
No, in other words, my major question, we don't have any disciplinary tool. We don't have it, right? We do not have anything, only removal. or let it go or remove. That I do not understand.
We don't have
What is
removal.
Any
We don't,
disciplinary tool.
we don't have removal. We have no tool.
Oh, no tools, okay.
Except
no
an election,
tools.
excuse me, except I see Kathy shake her head, except an election. We have an election.
Okay, that was my
Um,
question. We do not have any disciplinary tool to stop somebody, to prevent, continue, whatever. Thank you very much.
Well, that's my opinion, but it looks like others may have a different view.
Before Kathy, Susan had asked to speak.
Yeah, I wanted to just say that we've heard a lot throughout this term of the county council voicing their unhappiness with the county executive. And I think that has sort of caused a heightened concern for me that I don't always agree with their stances on when they're against the county executive. And so again, to give them the ultimate say just seems too much power with the council. So I wanted to add that, although I would like to, if there was some other disciplinary tool, as Galena has suggested, to sort of bring to light to the, and I guess it could be brought to light of the public, misconduct that was occurring that wasn't known to the public. Is there any possibility to have a, well, there's no recall. So I guess we're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. I mean, recall to me would be the ideal thing if there was some outrageous behavior that was going on the part of the county executive. But short of that, my concern stands with, the power, investing that much power in the county council.
Kathy?
To address the issue though, and I'm not that cognizant of what all happened in Baltimore, but it sounds like somebody did make a complaint about the conduct that was occurring. And in fact, that would have been a violation of the ethics rules. So there are rules in place. People can call out misconduct. There can be an investigation into that, especially if it rises to the level of, law breaking. So I think there are processes in place to address the issues that have occurred, that have been alluded to. I don't think we're without recourse completely, but I do also agree with Susan that, it's vesting too much power in a group that tends to vote unanimously on most of the things they vote on. And it could set up political factions and warring that make me uncomfortable.
Okay. I think we beat this one to death. Let's take a vote. The language on page 23, which is consistent with our earlier discussion, but inconsistent with the views of a lot of people today. All those in favor of the language on page 23, if you would raise your hand at this time. Or I can do a roll call. Would that be easier since not everybody's on the page? Why don't we do this? Let me call out your names and you say aye or nay, all right? Let's do that. Perry.
Aye.
Ron.
Aye.
Anita,
Nay.
Kathy,
Nay.
Galena. You're muted. And Galena, you're on mute.
I'm not sure. I can abstain because I'm not sure of pro and I don't have fatigue.
So
I
you
still stick with
passed.
two disciplinary tool.
All right, so you're not voting. Susan,
Nay.
Nicole,
Nay.
David,
Aye.
I thought you called David before.
I did not call David before.
Called
I
Perry.
called Terry and Ron, Anita, Kathy, Susan, and Nicole. And now I call David.
Sorry then.
You're welcome. Chris,
Nay, and I'm happy to vote twice if you want to call me twice, George, but nay for my first vote.
thank you. I'm voting aye. Let's see, is there anybody I've missed here?
Nay.
Who?
Larry.
Larry? Oh, I'm sorry, Larry. Larry.
In Florida, that's why.
I
Oh,
vote
so
nay.
you're in Florida, Larry.
That's
My
right.
voice doesn't carry to Florida.
No, that's right. Nay.
Nay, Larry. All right. It's 6 nay, 4 yay, and Galena is not voting. All right, that's everybody, right? So the nays carry the day. So that language will not be a recommendation. I'll have to obviously change some of the language in the responses, I guess, to the commenters. So were the people who offered comments. So that won't be a recommendation. The people who voted against it will have to decide if they want to submit a minority report or not on that. And we'll have to discuss that among ourselves. All right, let's move on. Anything else as to the report? Kathy, you led off the last discussion. Is there anyone else who wants to lead off this discussion?
Yes, Georgia, may I?
Go ahead, David.
So I guess I would ask, that takes care of the recommendation as it relates to the county executive.
As far-
Are,
Go ahead.
are we, because is the calculus the same? Are the people voting the same way for modifying section 118 as it relates to the county council?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you, David. Well, let me throw that out to Kathy, Nicole, those who spearheaded the opposition to that one. Do you feel the same? Before I ask if there needs to be a vote on that, my assumption was it was the same.
I think earlier when we were discussing it, I pointed out that it was the same for both issues, really.
Agreed.
A lot of the conversation did relate to the council relative to the executive. This is the council relative to themselves. So I can see some of the arguments would be the same, but I am wondering if those of you, particularly those of you who thought this would vest too much power in the council relative to the executive, would be making the same argument on 118 versus 206.
I would, David. Again, it could be weaponized. Right now we have all same party county council members. And, if someone wanted to weaponize it, they could. If somebody different came in that they didn't like their politics, I think the same issue, the same arguments apply to the
Susan,
county council also.
let's just get a yes or no on this so we can shorten the conversation or lengthen it if need be. Susan, do you agree it apply to section 118?
I agree.
Chris?
Yes.
Larry? Nicole, you said yes, Nicole. right?
Yes.
All right. So.
Anita,
Anita,
On that, I think I'll abstain.
Anita abstains.
Galena.
Yeah, I also abstain, but again, very briefly, my suggestion about disciplinary tool, it's relevant, not working at all. We cannot introduce or have it just for you to understand versus very drastic measure. We don't at all, we are not going to have any. It's bad idea to have some disciplinary tool, not as drastical. Okay.
I'll even weigh in and go yes. If we're not gonna do it for one, I think it's best that we don't do it for the other.
Well, then,
I'm glad you raised it, David, by the way. Thank you. No, I think it was valid. It was an oversight on my part, and I appreciate you bringing it up. But I think at this point, I think it was right that we have symmetry and do it for both if we were going to do it. But if we're not going to do it for one at this point, we might as well not. All right, let's move on. Another section of provision, Susan, and then Kathy. Susan?
you're on mute.
Sorry. To clarify what occurs when two questions on the ballot are both approved by the voters but are reconcilable.
Yep. Which page? Page 22. Page 22, the language.
Yes, 22.
Okay.
A. So I also feel that giving the decision to a side that may have one vote more than the other is not responsible. So I would not want to have this be adopted.
All right, we've already been given a legal opinion that Ed has shared with us that from years ago, that if both were to be approved, neither passes. So what the commissioners had agreed upon in this language months ago, provisionally, was how to deal with that dilemma. And we came up with language akin to, not akin, almost identical to what was passed in Anne Arundel County, and also in many other states dealing with constitutional amendments to address that situation. And that's the language before you. So what you're suggesting is that there not be a solution and face the situation where both would fail.
Yes.
9 o'clock.
What?
Somebody said 9 o'clock. Or some mechanical thing said 9 o'clock. I don't know.
Kathy?
So I was going to bring up the same issue that Susan brought up. And, you know, I've been thinking about this one for a long time. You know, the current rule is if, as George, you just said, if both win, they both fail. And so I think Larry's suggestion for this item was an attempt to address that issue. But the more I think about it, I agree. If we have a low turnout, we didn't have very much interest in the hearings this time around. And I kind of took that as voters don't really care about these issues so much. And, you know, we've had some discussion in my mind, I think, is there a threshold that we should be expecting to make a very serious change in our charter? This is like the Constitution. And one vote, doesn't seem adequate enough to change a charter, especially if voters in general, let's say we get into a situation where there's low voter turnout because they just don't care. So I think the current system, if they both win, they fail, makes sense. Now, in the past, in the last election where we had two competing ballots, one obviously won and it went forward and the other one failed. So I think that makes sense and reflects the views of the voters better than to change it at this point.
Others? Larry.
Well, the last election with the redistricting issue of 9 for Montgomery, and then the one that was recommended by the council, certainly brings to light the problem with our current situation, where if both of those were to have passed, I look at it as the overwhelming majority of the people in the county wanted a change. And some people thought the 9 was better. Some people thought the 7 was better. But either way, they were looking for change. And in that case, I would say that the one that got the most votes should be the one that would go into press, be put into law. I don't want to leave it to the courts. And I think Ed's decision, Ed's talk about, well, what happened? Well, the court had decided that they both would fail. Well, it's obvious that that the majority of the voters wanted a change, and there was a slight differences between them. So I'm still very much in favor of this. I don't want to leave it to the courts to decide. I want to let the voters decide, and if both win, both of those were to have a majority, but were to have more votes for it than against it, right? That's what we're talking about. And that the overwhelming sentiment of the voters is that we want to change. There's might be differences between the two, but so I think that change should be affected by that and shouldn't be that's my view of this, and I think it's a good proposition. And I think the reason the courts couldn't make a decision is that there was nothing in law or policy that stated which would win. And so now we're making it clear in the charter that the majority, the person with the majority, the proposal with the majority of the votes should win. So anyway, that's where I see it, and that's where I'd like to leave it. I thought the wording that you'd done on that one was very good, George, by the way.
George, my hand's up.
Yep, I was about to call on you, David. David.
Let me start by associating myself fully with Larry's comments. That might be the first time in 3.5 years I could say that, but I want to do that. And then an additional reason for supporting this language is there are very well organized minorities of voters in this county that I think could use if they both fail, neither passes approach to take down otherwise positive changes that more voters want than not. To me, I fear that effort. I think this is a common sense approach to moving forward, that the ballot question with the most votes wins if both happen to pass. And so fully support the language as drafted, and agree also that this was well drafted and as a response to what we talked about as a committee, as a commission.
Susan.
David, do you elaborate on what you mean by groups trying to take down changes, or you alluded to some things and I'm not sure I understand.
I don't know that I need to go into depth, Susan. It's based on my personal opinion, as others have stated. But if you want an example, I think the ballot question the last time around to go 9-0 was a well-organized group of a minority of the county as proved by the voters. The last time around, it was a well-organized, well-funded minority group in the county that sought to get rid of at-large representation, and I think was demonstrated by the voters. But I do think, and I did fear that situation, we would have both passing and neither approach would succeed, which in my case wouldn't have been the worst thing from my own perspective, but I think would have been wrong for the county as the votes played out. So, and I think there are other issues around which I'll add, I think the Republican Party is a well-organized, well-funded minority of Montgomery County. And I think that there would be opportunities if we left this the way it is for mischief. And so I fear leaving this in, leaving it as is, and support the language as suggested. That's a full answer to your question. I answered you when others have made allusions to threats and weaponization and have not been asked to specify what they were talking about. But that's my answer.
Kathy?
Well, I think David makes a strong argument, but I would say it runs both ways. In fact, it was a concerted effort. There was a referendum from the public who went out and got petition signatures for a 9-district referendum. And the county council, on the last day of the summer session, introduced a competing measure. And through the well-oiled system that they used, they were able to defeat the public referendum. But they won in the end, fair and square. And it wasn't a tie. So if enough people come out and say, this is our preference, then that's what I would support. But if they are basically tied in winning, and just by a small margin, I don't think that's enough to demonstrate public demand for a change, for that particular change. Maybe for a change in general to address Larry's issue, because I do agree in part with his argument. But in the end, if they both win and it's a small margin, I don't think that's enough of a public demonstration of what they really want to change the charter.
If I could just make 1 or 2 comments. Firstly, as far as winning with a small margin, let's recognize that candidates also win with small margins here in the county and all around the country. If a person wins with 3 votes or 10 votes or 100 votes, they carry the day. And we need to recognize that. So it's no different with a ballot question. However many votes prevails, that's the winner, and that's democracy. I definitely associate myself with Larry's comments, and I just want to address one other point that Kathy mentioned as far as low turnout. My thinking is that if this charter amendment were to prevail, and of course, as I said earlier, I think this is the only solution, as Ed had brought to our attention, and as is done in Anne Arundel, I believe it will have the very effect of spurring both sides of opposing ballot questions to generate support, recognizing what the consequence will be. That can only result in a higher turnout at the polls. Both sides will be advocating for their position so as to avoid what could happen. So I think it will result in a higher turnout, just what we would want. Others? All right. Do we need to take a vote on this too?
Yes.
All
I
right.
think you do, George.
All right, let's do that. Let me just make my paper here so I don't lose it. All right, for and against the language that we have on whatever page this is, 22. We're talking about irreconcilable. All right. Those in favor, let's go around the horn here. On my screen, Larry, you're up there. Larry? You're mute. Larry?
Well, he who was last is now first. I vote yes.
All right, Larry. Anita?
Nay.
Nay?
Mhm.
All right. Anita? Kathy?
Nay.
Nay. Galena?
Aye.
Galena is aye. Susan?
Nay.
Nicole?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Ron?
Aye.
Perry?
Aye.
Chris?
No.
Okay, George is aye. Did I leave anybody out? So I think that's everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 aye, 4 nay. It carries. All right. Let's move on. Next. Anything else on the report? Anything else on the report? Okay. Well, we've had a healthy discussion, obviously, on those two issues. For those who are in the minority on the last one, you need to decide if you want to write a minority report or not on that. Okay. Then hearing no other discussion, we're done for the day. The next meeting, the intent is to have a final draft report to present to you for us to vote on, ready to go to the county council for May 1st. Christine tells me, maybe you've told all of us, I don't know, that we should be in a position to meet in person finally at the next meeting, since the county council is going back in person, I think next week, not next week, next meeting, maybe next meeting. So I assume it's your pleasure that we meet in person next month. Is that fair to say? Do I hear any dissent? So unless things change, we'll meet in person next month.
Is it have the Zoom option?
Good question, Perry. Would the Zoom option remain, Christine?
What we will attempt to do, well, I'll say short answer, yes, unless you hear otherwise from me. What we'll plan to do is have the meeting on our 4th floor of the council office building. There is a room on the 4th floor where we can do a hybrid meeting. So you can be in person, but at the same time, Perry, if you needed to, participate remotely, that could be accommodated. And in addition, we should be able to record the meeting. So that is the plan. I will try to just verify that as soon as possible. And in terms of, just reserving the room, and I'll let you know if anything unexpected crops up.
Kathy?
So that will be on the 13th, is that correct?
Yeah, whatever the date is on the agenda. Yeah, that sounds right. 13th.
13th of Wednesday.
April 13th, yeah.
What I've got.
Yeah. 13.
April 13th.
Yes, Wednesday.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I just want to say thanks for your work, George, on this. I mean,
Yes, that
I
wasn't
thought it was,
stated. That was not
I
stated.
thought it was well done, but certainly it brought up some questions and we resolved them.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was really pleased to see something in a draft that we could react to. Thank you.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Yeah.
Tedious job.
Excellent,
tedious job.
excellent job, George.
Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning?
Wait,
Say
can
aye.
I say my thank you to George? Thank you, George.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We are adjourned.